As per typical, on a Saturday afternoon, customers were hustled in and out of the parking lot of Greenfield Grocery in Boise, Idaho. Amidst the chaos, a man much older than anyone could have imagined pushing carts maneuvered a small row back into the corral with painstaking effort. His frame was wiry but strong, and his movements were deliberate and even graceful in their determination. Carts were squeaking under the weight of weekly groceries. When Elon Musk, who was in town for a private meeting, got out of his electric car to get a quick snack, he wasn't drawn to the store's bustling activity but rather to the elderly man carefully setting up carts as though it were his life's work. Musk wasn't one to overlook things that piqued his interest. He stayed motionless, watching a puzzled look go across his face. Something about the scene struck Musk, though he wasn't sure why, as he watched as the man carefully aligned the carts, taking an extra moment to wipe down a particularly grimy handle. Other shoppers passed by without a second glance, but Elon remained rooted in place. The man's face bore the marks of decades of hard work, with lines etched deep from years spent under the sun, a silver beard cropped neatly, and a pair of glasses that seemed older than most of the lot. Elon whispered in his own mind. He moved forward without hesitation, driven by a peculiar sense of urgency and curiosity, and Elon Musk unintentionally entered one of the most meaningful human relationships of his life at that precise moment. "Excuse me, sir." Elon spoke out to the elderly guy in a firm but courteous voice. "Something I can help you with," the man said, straightening up and turning toward the voice. His pale blue eyes were slightly squinted behind the thick lenses of his glasses, with the midday sun reflecting off their rims. His voice was steady but raspy, and there was a hint of suspicion in his tone, as if he wasn't used to strangers stopping to talk to him. Elon paused before answering, saying, "I noticed you out here. You don't see people your age very often." He pointed to the line of neatly arranged carts and said, "Doing this kind of work." The man laughed dryly and adjusted his cap, which bore a faded logo from a company that had vanished. "Someone's got to do it," he said. "These kids they hire nowadays leave the carts all over the place. You'd think it was rocket science. Do you work here full-time or part-time?" the man asked, leaning slightly on one of the carts. "His name is Henry, by the way, and yes, they only allow me work here part-time." Elon grinned at the irony but didn't push the joke. "I make it work, though, since I have expenses to pay." Although Henry's remarks were straightforward and bordering on contempt, Elon felt something more was going on, so he turned to look at Henry's grizzled hands. "I never imagined that I would still be working at this age, but life doesn't always go as planned. I lost my pension years ago when the factory shut down, and Social Security barely keeps the lights on, so here I am." Elon asked, his tone softening, knuckles swollen veins like cords, the kind of hands that told stories of decades of labor bills at 90 years old. Henry sighed, taking off his cap, and running a hand through what little hair he had left. Like a kick to the gut, a man who had obviously dedicated his life to honest labor was reduced to pushing shopping carts in the sweltering heat to make ends meet. "Do you have family?" Henry's voice trailed off a little as Elon asked his question, which was now laced with worry. He had a wife and had lost her 5 years ago. He replied, "I'm alone now, but I'm not complaining because I get to move around and stay busy beats." Feeling sorry for myself while lounging around the house, Elon nodded, appreciating the man's perseverance. "Would it be okay if I asked you a few more questions about your life, Henry? I think there's a fascinating narrative here." A half-smile appeared on Henry's aged face as he shrugged. "If you're that interested, sure. If you feel like it, you can buy me coffee during my upcoming break." Elon grinned. The two men discovered a tiny bistro across the parking lot and sensed the start of something spectacular. Henry protested about warm coffee mugs, but Elon insisted on paying. Henry started to piece together his tale. "Wichita, Kansas, is where I was raised." Henry began staring out the window as if to evoke the past. "Life seemed easier back then, but it wasn't. My mom took odd jobs wherever she could, and my dad was a mechanic. We didn't have much, but we got by." Henry halted, his fists clenched around the mug. "I falsely claimed to be 17 years old in order to enlist in the military in 1952, during the Korean War, but I didn't see any action. I learned how to work with my hands by spending the most of my time repairing tanks and jeeps." Following the service, Elon listened carefully, his customary acerbic glare softened by a sincere interest in Henry's life. "I immediately started working at a factory, where I spent almost 40 years making airplane components. It wasn't a glamorous job, But it was honest, and I met my wife, Mabel, there. She was the best thing that had ever happened to me." A tiny smile formed on Henry's lips. Leaning forward, he said, "What happened to the factory?" even though his eyes glistened with a trace of sadness. Closing down in the late 1990s, Henry sighed deeply. "They said that one day we were working overtime to meet a deadline, and the following day we were handed pink slips. It felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me, and Elon could see the pain they carried." "How did you manage?" he asked, and Henry shrugged slightly. "To make money meet, Mabel and I downsized and sold the house, so I took on odd jobs here and there, did janitorial work, maintenance, etc. Moved into a little apartment. It wasn't easy, but we managed, and she was constantly so upbeat. Kept me rooted." Elon remained silent for a moment to allow Henry to gather himself. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said sincerely, "thanks. She got sick with cancer, and by the time we discovered it, it was too late. I lost her 5 years ago, and that's when things really got tough, the bills piling up, and I didn't have her to share the load anymore. I'm not one to sit around feeling sorry for myself, so I came here, got this job. The manager gives me flexible hours," Henry remarked, clearing his mouth. "It's not much, but it keeps the lights on and the food on the table, plus I get to meet people." Unquestionably, Henry was a man who had persevered through countless hardships and had not allowed life to break him. Elon's tone was contemplative when he eventually spoke. "There is something amazing about the way you hold yourself, Henry. You don't allow resentment to triumph. You've lived a life that most people can't comprehend. You've worked hard, loved sincerely, and faced more than your fair share of adversity." Henry chuckled quietly. "Well, what's the alternative? Life doesn't owe you anything. All you can do is make the most of what you're given." Elon nodded, his thoughts already rushing. "It's not much, but it keeps the lights on and the food on the table, plus I get to meet people." Unquestionably, Henry was a man who had persevered through countless hardships and had not allowed life to break him. Elon's tone was contemplative when he eventually spoke. "There is something amazing about the way you hold yourself, Henry. You don't allow resentment to triumph. You've lived a life that most people can't comprehend. You've worked hard, loved sincerely, and faced more than your fair share of adversity." Henry chuckled quietly. "Well, what's the alternative? Life doesn't owe you anything. All you can do is make the most of what you're given." Elon nodded, his thoughts already rushing. "The next morning, let's just say it's time for the world to hear your story." When Henry heard his phone buzzing, which is not often the case, he rushed for it and squinted at the screen, where the name Elon Musk was displayed in bold letters. Henry shook his head and answered, half thinking he was still dreaming. "Good morning, Henry," said Elon, in a groggy voice. "I hope I'm not calling too early," he said, sitting up on the edge of his bed. "What's on your mind?" Elon started. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday. I would like to schedule another meeting with you today since I have the resources to help you tell your story." Henry paused. "But if you're game, tell me what you're planned." "Let's just call it an opportunity." Curiosity overcame Henry, and at 10 a.m., he was sitting in their customary position, waiting for Elon, when Musk arrived. Without further ado, he launched into his plan. "I want to do something meaningful for you, Henry." Elon responded cryptically, "Trust me, meet me at the cafe at 10. "Here's what I'm thinking." Elon started by saying, "You've worked hard your entire life and the system let you down, but you've refused to give up, and that's inspiring." Henry listened in disbelief as Elon presented his concept. Musk desired to begin by making a payment. After paying off all of Henry's outstanding bills, he intended to provide for Henry's living expenses for the remainder of his life. However, Elon also wanted to use his platform to tell Henry's story more widely, highlighting the hardships and tenacity of diligent people like him. This is not philanthropic. This is about recognizing the life you've lived and the principles you represent, and it's about demonstrating to others that hard work and decency still count, Elon continued, noticing the doubt in Henry's expression. "That's too much," Henry said, shaking his head. "I don't know what to say," Elon encouraged. "Allow me to assist." After a protracted silence at last, Henry nodded in a tremulous voice. "Okay. The upcoming weeks will be hectic if you truly believe that this will benefit others." Elon assembled a team to take care of Henry's financial obligations, including paying off past due medical bills, paying off credit card debt, and making sure his modest apartment was paid for in full. However, Elon went one step further and had Henry speak at a small community event, where his story was met with standing ovations and tears. Videos of Henry's speech went viral, igniting discussions about the working class's struggles and the significance of systemic change on social media. Despite everything, Henry maintained his humility. He would remark, "I'm just an old man doing what I can to get by," whenever someone gave him praise, but he felt a newfound sense of purpose in the back of his mind, being aware that his narrative was having an effect. Elon wasn't done yet. He said that he would establish a foundation in Henry's honor to help elderly people who are struggling financially. Nobody should have to push carts at 90 to buy food. Henry, who was visibly moved, stood next to Elon Musk at the foundation's launch and stated, "I never thought I'd see the day when someone like Elon Musk would take an interest in someone like me. It's more than I ever could have imagined. I've spent my life trying to get by." Elon wanted to make a statement, not merely assist Henry, and Henry wanted to do the same. As word of Henry's story spread, it sparked a national outpouring of reactions, demonstrating that even the tiniest deeds of honor and diligence might spur great change. There were a lot of posts and comments on social media, not only about Elon Musk's altruism but also the underlying meaning of his deeds. At a local Omaha cafe, a waitress on her break watched Henry's story on her phone with tears streaming down her cheeks. The videos of Henry speaking at community events were shared millions of times with hashtags like #HonorHardWork and #ElderCareMatters. "My grandfather is in a similar situation." She told her coworker that despite working all his life, he still faces daily challenges. In Sacramento, a small business owner saw Henry's story and felt inspired to change his own company. He implemented new policies to ensure his older employees had better benefits and job security, saying that no one who has dedicated decades of their lives to work should feel abandoned in their later years. Meanwhile, Henry's foundation quickly gained traction, and Musk's seed funding encouraged other philanthropists to contribute, turning it into a nationwide initiative. The foundation started partnering with local nonprofits to provide resources to struggling seniors, and advocating for legislative changes to alleviate pensioners' financial instability for Henry. He received messages from strangers praising him for sharing his story and motivating them to take action, which had a bizarre and humble ripple effect. "I want to do better for my grandparents and for others like you because of one letter in particular, a handwritten note from a teenager in Tulsa who recounted your story, which made me realize how much I take them for granted." Elon also saw the effect his efforts had had, as he got emails from activists, lawmakers, and CEOs, many of whom promised to fund improved systems for the elderly. Elon stated in an interview that Henry reminded us of our goals. One evening as Henry watched the news, he thought of a future where hard work and respect are recognized regardless of age. Overview of the most recent initiatives of the Foundation. Whether he intended it or not, Henry's narrative had become a symbol of resiliency and a force for change. He couldn't help but shake his head in awe. "I never set out to change the world," he told himself. "I was just doing what I had to do to get by." As a result of Henry's story, people all around the nation started to view their elderly neighbors differently, not as remnants of the past, but as wise individuals who should be respected and supported for every new endeavor. One senior's medical debt was settled, a retired person who no longer dreaded eviction found company, and a lonely elderly person. Henry's modest act of tenacity had developed into something much greater than himself, and as the influence grew, so did the message that no deed of diligence or honor is ever too minor to have an impact.